we're going to go on to the next speaker, which like strangely enough, or not strangely, but just the reality is it's me. I'm going to do the next talk. And what I'm going to talk about is the United Nations NGO event. It's about the United Nations and also the what happens. There's an NGO forum around the United Nations that is meant to get the views of women all over the world. And I'm going to tell you about what WDI has been doing in relation to that and what we've found out. So much of this is done by people, not me, in WDI, and I'm just sort of sharing with you what women have done. So brief introduction to the UN. They have done quite a lot. The United Nations are they were founded in 1945. Currently, there are 193 member states. So it's the closest thing in a way that we have to a global parliament. How much power they have is very up for sort of debate. There's probably not very much power, but they are a place where the countries, the states of the world can meet and discuss things and interact and hopefully solve things peacefully. Human rights have been around. The idea of human rights have been a long time. This is the idea from the French Revolution that all human beings are born equal in dignity. This is actually from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that they should act in dignity, and people are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So that's a bit of a worry, isn't it? It says brotherhood. But so the French Revolution was big on rights, and the Enlightenment, those sort of 17th, 18th century, 19th century, the idea that people were equal, but it was men, and it was the fraternity, the brothers. There were early advocates of women's rights, Olympe de Gouges and Mary Wollstonecraft and suffragettes. Then get up to 1945, and Eleanor Roosevelt was put in charge of and took charge of bringing together and drafting with others the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so that was a sort of important document, one of the founding documents of the United Nations. Then almost immediately after that, the Economic and Social Committee of the UN adopted a resolution implementing the principle of equal pay for work of equal value for men and women everywhere. So that's very much the women as workers should be treated equally, but it didn't go much further than that. And in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was basically the state should treat men equally, but men could do what they wanted in the family. So women were in trouble because, you know, it was fine to rape us, give us no money, etc. So it was a sort of no man's land or a violent area, the family, and men were allowed to do what they wanted. Anyway, later on, we got, via the United Nations, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. That's CEDAW, and you hear that a lot in relation to the United Nations. And these countries, the dark blue ones, have all ratified, so they've signed and ratified and implemented to some extent CEDAW. So United States is a signatory but has not ratified it, and then you can see a couple of countries have not, like Sudan and I think it's Iran and Somalia have done no action, but most countries have. Now, here's a picture of the United Nations. This is their General Assembly in New York. It's a very significant place where people of the world come together to discuss global problems. And so women have, since it was founded, have seen this as a place that we want to lobby, we want to make our voices known, and we want to gain ground for women's rights. Now, as well as the formal United Nations, there are two areas where civil society, NGOs, that's non-governmental organizations, can join in. One of them, so you could be, if you were the representative to the United Nations for your country, that's one way, or we could lobby our UN representative. But you can also get ECOSOC status, so you can get recognized, and then you can speak at United Nations events. And the Commission on the Status of Women happens every March for 2 weeks. But there are many times when women's issues are discussed. Now, to get ECOSOC status, you have to have various bits of standing as an organization. And currently, WDI does not have ECOSOC status, but COAL, the Coalition of Activist Lesbians in Australia, who are one of our signatory organisations and we work closely with, has got ECOSOC status. And I imagine maybe some of you know in organisations that have that. So you have a voice at the UN. But the other place you can have a voice at the UN is this parallel event. And you can see women here in meetings who come along to this is like a side event outside the United Nations. So any NGO can turn up and make their voices heard. So it's a way of sort of getting voices from all over the world who aren't necessarily properly organized, not long term, but have organized as women, in this case, because it's to do with women. So theoretically, this should be a place where our voices will be heard. Now, they've done really good things. You sort of probably hear about that. The International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, the 25th of November. So this is a UN promoted day. And just to show that the UN's important and the fact that states have ratified CEDAW and take notice of the international community and the UN, is the abortion changes in Northern Ireland. This was recently changed 2020. Now, if you go into the House of Commons library, that's the British House of Commons, it states that one of the reasons they allowed abortion in Northern Ireland, and it says on this slide, was they want to go along with the recommendations in paragraphs 85 and 86 of the CEDAW report. And the CEDAW report on the United Kingdom suggested that would help. Now, states don't want to look really bad compared to other states, and they often do take advice from the United Nations or United Nations bodies and reports that come out. And they also have actually ratified CEDAW. So anyway, here's a government saying that the reason they did something, which in this case is good for women, allowing abortion, is because of the UN. Now, this is another good thing that they do. UN Women have quite a lot of money to promote actions on behalf of women. So this is a woman teaching girls how to write and read, promote education. And then this is another situation where a young Nigerian woman is helping to set up initiatives to get women involved in communities after the Boko Haram abduction of the girls from a girls' school in northern Nigeria. And to to empower women in northern Nigeria and those sorts of areas. So that's another excellent action from UN Women. Now, but there are conflicts of rights, and there's a massive conflict of rights, which you can imagine what that's going to be. So, or you probably a lot of people know that. So the UN Executive Director, this is the former one, the one before the current one, said a couple of years ago, people have a right to identify themselves in the way that they want to. It is our role as feminists to always be there and to make sure that people know that we accept them for who they are. So about the last 4 or 5 years, UN Women, which is the body in charge of promoting women's rights globally and getting information from women globally, gathering our voices internationally to carry on the good work of the international community and international sisterhood, have decided that men who say that their women are women. Now, we as WDI, we wrote, well, a few women, Sheila Jeffries, Maureen O'Hara, and Heather Brunskill-Evans and a couple of others drafted, with some feedback from others, a Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. And this is directly based upon the commitments made by states all over the world under CEDAW. And the reason being that this is existing commitments by governments all over the world to promote women's rights. And we were saying, you've started doing a good job, let's continue to promote CEDAW. There's so much more work to be doing to reduce violence against women, get rid of oppression, exploitation, etc. And you could see here that we had started off with various organizations, and now, right now, we've got, this is today, we've got 34,000, nearly 35,000 signatories and 492 organizations. So you would think that given that our declaration is basically promoting CEDAW, which the United Nations is a United Nations convention, and we have the support of nearly 500 organizations and nearly 35,000 people, you would think that the UN NGO body would give us a place to represent those views. Those views are very, very straightforward. They're basically saying women's, and these are our the parts of the declaration. Our rights are based on sex, motherhood is a female status, we want physical and reproductive integrity, freedom of opinion and expression, and a couple of others. You can look on the website or pause this to see. Now, the problem that we, WDI, worry about is that replacing the word sex with gender identity in law, policy and social practice undermines pretty much all of the progress made on behalf of women. And it's a very clearly sort of logical argument, which is about 6,500 words long, based on the commitments people have made and evidence, logical evidence, and now we've got lots of actual evidence since then. Now, what have we been doing since then as an organisation? So in June 2021, now we were called Women's Human Rights Campaign at the time, you could see on this slide, we sent a letter to probably about 20 or 25 key decision makers in the United Nations institutions and bodies and governments, explaining our concern. And you can see here that 2021, we had 18,000 signatories, but we explained the argument about replacing the legal category of sex with gender identity, and that would be a problem for women. We also made in 6 languages a PDF which explained the ideas of the declaration and explained why CEDAW is good, but why CEDAW will be undermined, why all these brilliant ideas for women's rights are going to be destroyed. We did not hear back from them. Now, July 2021, our Australian group, the Feminist Legal Clinic, that they are the representatives of WDI in Australia, they made a joint submission to the CSW. So that's the actual UN body. So you can lobby direct individuals who are decision makers, or you can lobby the actual sort of committees. And this is the Commission on the Status of Women. So we lobbied them, said our concerns. Then in 2022, and for those 2 years, we participated in the NGO side event at the CSW. So that's a New York side event. In fact, the year before, we actually went along and launched our declaration in New York. Well, we being some of WDI, so Layla Namdarkan, Sheila Jeffries, Maureen O'Hara, Heather Brunskill-Evans, and a couple of other people. and went along. So we went along, launched the declaration, tried to get the message out. Now, we also followed up these CSW meetings with very specific concerns about the rolling out of this SOGI, this sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender-based language throughout unwomen, which I think is a very Orwellian way of, they've changed their name to unwomen, like as a step towards our total erasure. But UN Women have adopted this inclusive language, and we lobbied them and said we're worried about it. And so we've given very, very detailed argumentation and backed it up and sent it to most of the key decision makers in countries. Now, we have 51 country contacts, and we have at various times got our country contacts to lobby their own UN representatives. So we are gradually getting the message out, and we don't hear a lot back from them, but we do believe that, well, we know we have some supporters in the UN system, and we know that some of the decision makers agree with us. Some of them are starting to raise concerns, and they are using the term sex-based rights, which, as far as I understand, was first used in our Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. And I was looking around Googling sex-based rights the other day, and it does look as if I think probably Sheila Jeffries, who I understand developed the term, we were talking about what's going to go in the declaration, and I remember a conversation with Sheila where she was saying, I think sex-based rights is the best term we can use. It's not perfect, but it will do. It's good. So Sheila's not here because she's away, but let's get that. We'll find that out. But that term of the defense of women's sex-based rights does seem to have it percolated into some areas of the UN, and we do definitely think we have supporters at a range of different levels. So this sort of relentless lobbying and very effective lobbying and raising awareness and building a grassroots movement is going to pay off. We are going to win this, we think, and it explains a bit what WDI's strategy is, what we've been doing on that. Okay, so this is just the PDFs that we sent when we sent around to all these recently to all these decision makers, and you can see it's really impressive. It's very well written, formal response to the UN CSW, communication, letter of complaint from Australia, information from Brazil, from Mexico. Sometimes we've done this in 5 languages. Now, 2022, following the, this is actually, the CSW this year has just finished. It just finished yesterday. So we didn't get to do anything at the NGO forum because they wouldn't let us this year. But just say that last year we did get to do a presentation, and we got quite a lot of women and men came along to hear our concerns in this huge international online and offline meeting that gathers women from all over the world. So we were sharing our information. Now, this was the follow-up, which was done, and we're asking for UN Women's response, but they never responded. Now, not only that, but this year, and I actually think, apologies if I haven't put everything in, because I think there's been other actions that I'm maybe not sharing. But this year, there were 2 actions towards UN bodies. One of them, the OHCHR, which is something on human rights. Sorry, maybe someone in the chat will know what it stands for, but the organization of something on human rights. And then the CEDAW committee. Now, it's a very obscure organization, the UN, with many different bodies, and they meet in Geneva sometimes, and in New York, and in various other places, and they intersect as this sort of web of global governance, which does try to do positive things sometimes in relation to women's rights. So we're carrying on sending submissions wherever possible, and WDI, being a really large organization now with lots of activists, is our strategy is to keep going, to keep raising awareness, and use the declaration, and use the fact that we've got nearly 500 organizations supporting us, and that we've got 37,000 signatories to say this is valid. There's, you know, people of the world are worried about this change in language. Here's something from UN Women on International Women's Day. This is a couple of years ago. They are really promoting genderism, that the ideas of genderism, and the idea that men who say they're women are women, and then putting out these bits of sort of false narrative. Trans women are 4 times more likely to experience violence than cisgendered people. So they're using the words, they use their platform and the money that our governments give to the United Nations to promote this ideology. There's this year they had an NGO forum, and I'll just show you a couple of bits which are really quite worrying from this NGO forum. So these are the safety guidelines, and at the bottom of the first block it says, this is what they're saying we should be doing if we go along to their NGO forum. It says, on a confidentiality and I statements, I, instead of they, we, or you, speak from your own experience instead of generalizing. It's a complete individualism. So we're now being encouraged, or maybe told, this is safety guidelines, that we should not say women are annoyed about male violence. That would be generalizing. What they want us to do is become utterly fragmented individuals who cannot be a political movement. And then also, I mean, you can see here, it says, respect the diversity of languages, opinions, and expertise, while acknowledging that sexism, racism, classism, heterosexism, transphobia, global north domination, and other institutionalized forms of oppression exist. So transphobia is the big one that they're taking on board now, which is the reason that we were not allowed, WDI were not allowed to have a side event this year. Well, at least we assume that, because of course they don't tell us exactly why. This is what their event was this year. It was about innovation and digital technology for gender equality. So they do use the word women and children. They carry on using it, but they use it interchangeably with gender. And so sex and gender are the same thing in their mind. They've forgotten the idea that gender is a form of oppression, and it promotes sex role stereotypes, and it's a way of oppressing women. They did know that about 15 years ago, but that's gone by, and now it's all gender equality, gender-based violence. So we don't see who's doing what to whom. This is their response to us, saying, your application to host a parallel event this year has been denied, as your event does not align with NGO CSW/NY, that's New York's values or mandates. And that's a sort of typical act where they don't say, we don't like you because we think you're transphobic, or because this is hate speech. We can't really say why, but we do know that what we are wanted to do is host a parallel event to say that we have these webinars and we're promoting CEDAW using technology, because it's meant to be about technology. So basically saying we want to show how well we are promoting women's rights and trying to fight oppression, and they say that doesn't align with their values. But typically they're a bit obscure about it. And then just to show one of our final things is that we followed up to say we would like to have a meeting, would like to discuss our concerns. And so that's being done by WDI, and that gives you a quick overview of what we've been doing. So it's quite a core part of our work. We don't believe that the UN is at all perfect. And we know that they have not, they've done imperfect things in the past. But we also sort of value CEDAW, and we value the Beijing Platform for Action. And we also value the international, this sort of feeling of international sisterhood that came from those massive UN conferences. And we hope that by engaging with them, we can influence the debate. And we do hear back from some of our sort of WDI members that it is being heard within the United Nations. So yeah, that's it. That's what we're doing.